Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual town hall with U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Esme Villarreal, and it's my great pleasure as President and CEO of your local chamber to moderate today's event on behalf of course, your local chamber, the Brownsville Chamber of Commerce, and respectfully welcome you on behalf of our leadership, our board of directors, and of course, our membership. Before we begin today's program, I would like to advise you that we are recording today's webinar, actual virtual town hall with our U.S. Senator Cornyn, and it will be available for you to, of course, view and share later if you're unable to join us or would like for other colleagues and, of course, business leaders to see today's town hall. We also would love to hear from you. We invite you to respectfully communicate your questions and comments via Zoom and Facebook chat. As well, we encourage you to start a watch party. I know that many of our followers right now are watching us via Facebook Live. So please share this information and welcome everyone, your friends again, and your colleagues to join us. As today we're going to hear an important policy discussion regarding matters impacting the business community in Texas with Honorable Senior U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Before we begin today's virtual town hall, I would like to acknowledge and introduce one of our elected local commissioners and great leader. With us, it is always a pleasure to welcome a great friend and supporter of the local chamber. We do have, I was just told that she just joined us. So Commissioner Galonsky represents District 1. Commissioner, welcome, good afternoon. Commissioner Galonsky, if you can start your video. We're unable to see you on the screen. If you give us a second, we're trying to connect with our commissioner. Okay, as she's able to join us, we can go ahead and of course have her give some welcome remarks on behalf of our city of Brownsville. I know that we're currently experiencing some technical difficulties and we apologize for that. As I mentioned today, we're very honored to be joined by our U.S. Senator John Cornyn. He has served Texas as a judge, as an attorney general, and now as a U.S. Senator.
No, es que,
Oh, I'm sorry, we can. Hello, Commissioner. I think we lost connection once again. Commissioner Galonsky, if you can hear us. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue with the program. And again, we'll welcome her once we can have a better connection with her directly. As I was saying, he has served Texas as a judge, as Attorney General, and now as our U.S. Senator. He has earned a reputation as an articulate and powerful voice for Texas and Washington. He's known for reaching across the aisles to get things done, as he has done for recently passed coronavirus relief legislation. Senator Cornyn, we're very honored to have you with us this afternoon. On behalf of the leadership, we would like to express our gratitude for your commitment and ability to be involved in useful work and bearing appropriate responsibilities. We are grateful for your leadership, sir. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Esmeralda. I understand you're having a little bit of weather down in the valley, so maybe that's made it a little bit of a challenge with the connection. But let me just say, I appreciate joining all of you today, including those with the Brownsville Chamber, the Rio Grande Valley Partnership, SpaceX, Next Decade, and the Port of Brownsville. Thank you. Let me start by addressing events that occurred, actually it's a month ago now, the death of George Floyd, and the issue that has sprung back into clear view of many concerns about racial injustice, particularly when it comes to law enforcement. I had the chance to visit with Mr. Floyd's family by phone before his funeral, and mainly wanted to listen to them and learn what their point of view was. But Rodney Floyd, his brother, said, "Senator, we're from Texas, and we want some Texas-sized justice." And I thought that that's exactly right. And I took that to heart, and I said, "Rodney, we're going to do the very best we can to deliver that." But we know the problems that we are seeing when it comes to police relationships with their communities they serve, that there is a breach of, or a trust gap, a trust deficit, I should say. And that's something we all, I think, can contribute to try to heal. This last week, I joined my colleagues to introduce some police reform legislation, which would focus on accountability and transparency. And many of those provisions of the bill, like ending chokeholds, better training, accountability for body cameras, more diversity on the police force, have broad bipartisan support. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get the votes to get on the bill. But this issue is not going to go away, nor should it be delayed or kicked down the road because of election year politics. I don't think failure is an option. The irony is about 60 to 70% of the provisions were shared in a Democrat bill and a Republican bill. And in my experience, if you have 60 to 70% in common overlap, there's really no reason you can't work together to try to build consensus. So we've got our work cut out for us, and we will not give up. In the meantime, this all happened in the course of a pandemic like we'd never seen before. And we've been fighting a two-front battle, two-front war, one on the public health side and the other on the economic side. And I want to give my gratitude to the county and city officials, as well as emergency management coordinators, law enforcement, school districts, hospitals, and so many others on the front lines. I know many of you weren't able to do your job virtually. You had to show up in person, along with our healthcare professionals who have been true heroes through all of this. I don't remember any other event in my lifetime that's had as big an impact on our country. And I know Brownsville small businesses have been greatly affected. Congress has tried to respond quickly and boldly and passed 4 separate bills to support our healthcare providers, our workers, and businesses. So if you think about it, first of all, we needed to make sure that our hospitals had the personal protective equipment that they needed. And many of them deferred elective surgery. And so they needed some additional financial assistance to help them through this crisis. Ironically, because China sat on some of this information for a while, there was literally a global competition for personal protection equipment. And when I first talked to Governor Abbott about this, he said there's 2 things we need: testing and personal protective equipment. And we have funded an effort to provide both of those in huge volume. But we know this had a disproportionate impact on individuals who, through no fault of their own, didn't have any income, no paycheck, because their businesses have been shut down by the mitigation efforts. So first of all, we wanted to make sure that we sent direct financial assistance to those who needed it the most. A family of up to 4 could receive as much as $3,400. And so far, more than $21 billion in that direct financial assistance has been paid out to Texans. And then we expanded unemployment insurance eligibility and added another $600 per week in federal benefits. But then if we were really going to be successful, we needed to keep the small businesses up and running through a time when many of them had a lack of demand or were shut down for public health reasons. So we established the Paycheck Protection Program through the Small Business Administration, initially funding it for $350 billion, but it was so popular after 2 weeks, we had to add another $320 billion. So far, Texans businesses have received $40.5 billion across more than 372 individual PPP loans. And as you know, if you're able to maintain your payroll through June, that loan can be forgiven and be turned into a grant. So earlier this month, the Senate passed legislation to extend the amount of time you can use that fund in order to qualify for the grant program. So we know that as we enter hurricane season, it's particularly important that this program be fully functional and funded. Well, as you know, we've begun to reopen our economy, and the governor and the county judges and mayors are all working together collaboratively with the federal government to figure out how to do that safely. I think this is like sort of like trying to design and build an airplane while you're flying it. We've never been through this before, and while there are people who want to point the finger of blame, I think my energy and my time and my recommendation to anybody else is to try to figure out, save the blame game for later on. Let's get through this together as we always have before. So many of you know, of course, Andy Garcia in my South Texas office. So if you have any other questions or issues about any of this, please reach out to her. But before I conclude, let me just mention another issue that has been on the forefront of all of our minds, and that is the deferred action on childhood arrivals. It's roughly 700,000 young men and women who, through no fault of their own, find themselves stuck, really, having been granted temporary relief by the Obama administration. Now the Supreme Court has given Congress once again an opportunity to pass legislation that will allow these young men and women to stay in the only home they've known. And I'm willing to work with anyone, Republican or Democrat, who's interested in solving this problem. I've talked to the president personally about it, and I know there's a lot of sympathy for these young people, but they need more than our sympathy. They need our action or a permanent legislative solution. So let me just conclude and say it's a tough time, but I'm confident that Texas and our country will recover and come back stronger. It's an honor to represent all of you in the Senate, and once again, let me thank all of you for letting me join you today. And Esmeralda, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to answer a few questions.
Senator, we thank you once again for that update. You know, as Texans, as strong Texans, we highly depend and trust our leadership to really make the right decisions for the constituents of this great state. You know, as we were preparing for today's virtual town hall, we had the ability to reach out to our community throughout the whole South Texas region, and we received many questions to be addressed directly, of course, to you. Now, before we continue, I don't know if Commissioner Galansky is now able to join us. I know we were having some difficulties, and I do see that she's present. Commissioner Galansky, could you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Sorry about that earlier. Senator Cornyn, I would like to welcome you to Brownsville and thank you for joining us today. I'm one of the city commissioners here. I represent District 1, which is basically the southeast quadrant of Brownsville. And should I go ahead or should I start with my question?
Sure.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Now that we're on the line, we can go ahead and begin our question and answer session. Commissioner Galansky, once again, please, if you can go ahead and start this with your first question.
Okay, sorry. And I actually, yes, thank you. So I was wondering, what is the status or likelihood that there will be another Corona assistance package getting approved before the end of the federal budget year? And will there be funding for local governments that receive no assistance from the CARES Act through the Coronavirus Relief Fund?
Well, Commissioner, there will be another bill. It will be taken up in the July timeframe, mid-July. I think part of what we're trying to understand is the effectiveness of what we've done so far. And as you know, the federal government has thrown an unprecedented amount of money at this problem, and I voted for all of it. No, I never would have believed I would vote for $3 trillion in spending, but this is a war. And we have to defeat this virus and we have to recover. So I think it's well worth it. We've already provided, as you know, substantial amount of money for our state and local stabilization fund, but I know there's a lot of pain associated with the mitigation efforts and because there hasn't been revenue generated from sales tax. And so I'm confident we will address that in the next bill as well. one of the challenges is about half of the money that we've appropriated has not yet been spent. And some of the money that's been sent to Austin, I know, has trickled down. It's taken a long time to get to some of the smaller jurisdictions. And so we want to make sure that the money we are spending is being used for the best purpose. There are, for example, we've learned one large program, about $500 billion to help the airlines and help other businesses through making loans. So the Main Street lending facility through the Federal Reserve. It's taken a long time to stand up, and but over the passage of time, I'm beginning to doubt whether that money is really best spent there, or whether it might be plowed back into the PPP program, state, local stabilization, or other purposes. So that's another reason why we are tapping the brakes and waiting till July. But one of the ways I've learned a lot about how effective what we have done is through feedback like this. And so I've done about 100 different conference calls like this, video conferences, and I've learned about things like helping victims of domestic violence, dealing with people with mental health and substance abuse problems, dealing with liability protections in our next bill, so that people who do follow the guidelines and do begin to reopen their business or their school or their church, that they don't have to worry about being sued for just not being perfect in the way they've addressed this. All we need is people to act in good faith and to follow the guidelines, and I believe they should have that liability protections. So there's a lot of different components of this, but yes, there will be another bill, and I would welcome any specifics that we can't talk about today. If you'll get those to Annie Garcia, we'll be happy to take those into account as we work on that next bill.
Okay, well, thank you very much. On behalf of everyone watching, we appreciate you joining us today and sharing your valuable time and insight about what is happening in Congress. Thank you to your staff for facilitating this webinar, and just know that we, the residents of Brownsville, are very grateful for everything you do for our community.
Thank you.
So without further ado, I'll pass the microphone then to the next speaker.
Thank you, Commissioner. Once again, we thank you again for your leadership and for being invested in your community and always being very supportive of your local chamber and representing the business community. And Senator, we thank you, of course, for that response. I do have another question, and this comes from our former mayor of South Padre Island, Mr. Barry Patel, now CEO of the Hilton Garden Inn. The question is as follows. Businesses are struggling to survive in this new environment and need COVID-19 lawsuit protections. Will you support in the next stimulus bill protection for businesses from COVID-19 lawsuits? Senator?
Yes, I will, and that's really been one of the main focuses I've had as I listen to people talk about their efforts to slowly but safely reopen. This is a major concern hanging over their head, and also a major deterrent to reopening. Many of our smaller businesses are hanging on by a thread, and this could be the difference between survival or not. And so we do expect that there will be a provision there, which, as I indicated, would provide good faith compliance with guidelines at the local, state, or federal level. Obviously, we're not going to offer immunity across the board for intentional misconduct, no blanket immunity, but there will be a high legal burden placed on those bringing suit in order to prevent the harassment and ultimately deter Texas's job creators from keeping their head above water and rebuilding.
Thank you, Senator. And before we go into the next question, I have a question, and this comes on behalf of many of our local chambers and all chambers throughout the nation. We have very difficult times at the moment, as the majority of our chambers are strictly funded by membership, and for lack of a better word, our bread and butter, our businesses, our focus, our businesses. We all know and that our small businesses are truly experiencing financial hardships. We continue to serve and advocate for all businesses, regardless of the size. But being that said, also as a local chamber of commerce, we are a 501c6. More of a question, I have a plea on behalf of many of our chambers here, and I know right now we have the majority of our chambers joining us from the Valley. I know Sergio Contreras, our president and CEO from the RGB Partnership, is also present. We ask for your support so we can receive funding also as a 501c6, as we do have limitations. And when it comes down to loans and grants, we solely depend on the support and leadership that you and all other elected officials, of course, do and represent us as a whole. We plead that you please support us as a local chamber of commerce and all other 501c6, which are currently going through financial hardship, sir.
Well, Esmeralda, as you might imagine, I've heard from a number of people about this concern, and you have my commitment that I will do everything possible to include coverage under the PPP program for 501c6s, including chambers. I'm not exactly sure why we narrowed it so much to 501c3s, but this has been a learning experience as we've gone through this, and we will try to fix that in this next bill.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your support. We have another question. This is anonymous, and it states, why should the border be closed? Mexican nationals can fly to the border, but they cannot drive. Do you know how many businesses depend on this? More of a statement and question at the same time.
Well, we know how important cross-border trade and tourism are to not just the border, but to our entire economy in Texas and across the country. That's one reason I was such a big supporter of the USMCA agreement, the successor to NAFTA. I think part of the reason, is because of public health concerns. We know Mexico has many challenges when it comes to their health system, and I worry, and I think we need to stand ready to come to their assistance because they don't have the infrastructure from a healthcare perspective that we do. And of course, we know the virus can be spread inadvertently by people who don't have any symptoms, but yet have the virus and spread it to people who are vulnerable. So I understand the limitation to essential travel and trade, but this is, as long as we are able to get this virus under control in the near future, we know that this will be temporary only. And I'll certainly do everything I can to make sure that it does not extend beyond what is absolutely necessary for public health purposes.
Thank you, sir. And we do appreciate, again, that support. We here on the border highly depend on our, of course, visitors, from our tourists to, of course, a high number of investors currently that have an interest to start their business here on the border are our great friends and neighbors from across, from all over the nation, from Mexico. And we're very grateful for their continued support to our border city. As you know, we take pride in being binational, bicultural, and bilingual. And it's a great relationship. If our neighbors are doing great, we as Texans are doing great too. So it is important that we continue to, of course, to provide that support and for them to know that we here, the city of Brownsville, are open for business and we welcome them. But of course, with a great responsibility to flatten the curve, as you said, and all for health and preventive measures, of course. And now I have a question from one of our community leaders. He's the executive director and CEO for one of our two economic development organizations. He represents the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation, and that's Mr. Mario Lozoya. I don't know if he's available. Okay, I'll go ahead and ask. I know that he's unable to join us through call. So, Senator, it reads as follows. COVID-19 has exposed many strengths and weaknesses in our community processes. As you know, economic development depends on education and workforce development. During this period, schools closed and the teaching moved to the home. Teachers held online classes, students and parents depended on broadband connectivity to be successful remote students. It seems this process may be part of normal education to some degree going forward. The lack of broadband in the underserved communities is a huge issue. The RGB is one of the least connected regions in the entire country. Brownsville, for example, has over 50% of the households disconnected. Is this an agenda item at the federal level? Is there a federal agency that can help mitigate this issue via a community broadband infrastructure plan?
Yes, I think this virus has taught us a lot of things. One is our dependency on supply chains from outside of the country, and everything from car manufacturing between Mexico and the United States, and medical equipment, and then PPE from China and elsewhere, along with our basic medicines. But the other thing the virus has taught us is how important broadband is, internet connections. This is not a matter of just convenience, or this is now, I believe, a real necessity. And if you think about our school children who have not been able to go to class, this may be the only way they get access to the curriculum and the education they need during times like this. So this is not to mention the fact that the video conference we're doing right now, this is really important. So the Department of Agriculture announced earlier this year $13 million in funding for Texas to help build out some of our rural broadband infrastructure. And I've supported additional money in our annual appropriations bills. The CARES Act, which is the biggest piece of the bills we already passed, added another $100 million in additional funding. This is in addition to a combination of loans and grants available in many communities. But we recently talked to the USDA's Rural Development Office to discuss these issues, and I would encourage you to reach out to them as well. But I do believe that we will, in this next and last coronavirus bill, I do believe that this is going to be an issue that we will revisit. But please reach out to USDA and see what resources they have available locally, and then we'll collaborate with you to figure out how we can close the gap, because I agree with you, this is really important.
Thank you, sir. I do know that you do have another engagement followed by ours, and we do have about 4 or 5 questions, but to honor your time, if that's okay with you, we'll go ahead and skip perhaps some, and we will address them directly also to your office, if that's okay.
That's fine.
We have a question from our Port Director and CEO from the Brownsville Navigation District, of course, the Port of Brownsville, and as we know them locally, it's the port that works. And Mr. Capillano sent a question, and it reads, knowing the importance of this deepening project for the LNG companies and for the economic growth and job creation in South Texas, would the Senator will yourself support the inclusion of language that would designate one of the Corps' new starts as a P3 program selected project in the Senate Energy and Water Appropriations Bill?
Absolutely. We've already reached out to the appropriations committees to share the language, and we'll continue to monitor it and keep you updated. One of the challenges of dealing with the annual appropriations process is, in the meantime, we've had to deal with this extraordinary effort to fight the COVID-19 virus and recover from the economic consequences. But as we move forward with the appropriations, we'll keep you apprised. But certainly we were advocating for that in the Senate Energy and Water Appropriations Bill.
And if I can add also, Mr. Campirano also mentioned this. As you know, the Jones Act ship construction will be a game changer for the Port of Brownsville and the fledgling shipbuilding industry here. It will create many jobs over 3 years in Brownsville. Can you as a senator help with this shipbuilding project by urging the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to issue timely notices of intent to commence environmental reviews for this construction-ready projects?
Esmeralda, I'm happy to help. Please tell Mr. Capriano, and I support getting a notice of intent out the door as quickly as possible. And I know my staff's already reached out to the Department of Interior about this. So we look forward to supporting that effort.
Sir, And another question that comes from one of our leaders from our board of directors, that's lawyer Liliana Lizondo, representing Royston, Racer, Vickery, and Williams Attorney Office, states, with the surge in cases in Texas and around the country, more people face potential job insecurity. Does the Senate have any plans to address, one, the possible state budget deficits that would affect state employees, or any further economic support for employees of other affected industries?
Yes, that's been a very important issue because we know that the mitigation efforts have really hammered local and state revenues that are derived from sales tax primarily. We have already provided $150 billion to help state and local government. Texas got 11.2 billion of that. Some of it went directly to the larger cities and counties, but the bulk of it went to the state. And I know it's been a little slow getting down to the local level. And I continue to hear that Texas leaders want more flexibility in using these funds, and especially for critical services like EMTs, police officers, and firefighters. One of the problems has been, because this has all moved so quickly, there's been a lot of questions on what can I use the funds for. And in order to clarify that, I'm sponsoring a piece of legislation to include in this next bill that would provide maximum flexibility to local and state jurisdictions to use the money that we've appropriated. This would also remove the requirement that the funds be spent by the end of the year, the so-called use it or lose it. The issue now is evaluating how much money has been spent, whether, where more is needed. And so this is a dialogue that we want to continue to have with local and state leaders. What we don't want to do is we don't want the federal government, we don't want you as a taxpayer to have to bail out bad financial decisions made in other parts of the country. So that's the reason why we have some of these guardrails on the money, and we want to make sure it's spent for coronavirus recovery. But this is a conversation I know will continue, and we'll continue to welcome your comments about what else you need in order to fill those budget gaps.
Thank you, Senator. And I know we have one more minute for one more question, I'm sorry, and then of course we welcome the closing remarks on your behalf. But this comes again from Mr. Lozoya at the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation. The USMCA is going live this July 1st. We have had lots of interest in foreign direct investments as companies consider relocating to Texas, here on the Texas-Mexico border region. This is a huge opportunity to our region, as we have the three poorest MSAs in the country, and we can position ourselves to boost the economic condition. COVID-19 has caused a delay in this process. Can you please help the Department of Commerce make the case that FDI opportunities should have added flexibility to travel to this region and do business with us? And again, it's more not of a question, but more of a request. If we are asking for your support, as we have many interested investors that are willing to come here to the Texas border region. And again, this comes from our community leader, Mario Lozoya, from the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation. Sir, at this time, before we adjourn, on behalf, of course, of our board of directors and our membership, we want to thank your great staff at your office. It's been wonderful to work with Ana Garcia and Clarissa Sanchez. And of course, I would like to also take the time to thank Ramiro Gonzalez and David Ramirez. They're our co-chairs for the Governmental Affairs Division here for your local chamber. And again, sir, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to Brownsville, virtually for now, until we can meet again. And most importantly, we appreciate what you do for the constituents of our beautiful city in the South Texas region. We look forward to your continued support to allow us to grow economically, and of course, keeping in mind to flatten the curve at this moment. But we as strong and resilient Texans, we know we can count on you to move forward, sir.
Well, thanks, Esmeralda, and thanks to the Chamber for hosting this and everybody for letting me join you. This is a very effective way of communicating, and but it's no substitute for face-to-face. So I look forward to coming to Brownsville soon and sharing, maybe breaking a little bread and enjoying your company. But in the meantime, until that time, we'll keep the fight up. There are more than 100 different clinical trials to try to come up with treatments as well as a vaccine that will hopefully relegate this virus to the same status as a seasonal flu. I know that I listened to Vice President Pence today at the Coronavirus Task Force, and he talked about how much better position we are today than we were 2 or 3 months ago to deal with this virus, although we know that it's still a huge challenge. But I agree with you, Esmeralda, if it doesn't kill us, it makes us stronger. And we will be stronger coming out of this. And the way we do that is by working together and taking care of each other. So thanks for having me, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you everyone who has joined us today. This concludes today's virtual town hall. Again, we encourage you to contact your local chamber at 542-4341. Have a wonderful and blessed afternoon. Thank you.